What's going on, YouTube? This your boy Hey Heinous, another edition of Facts Over Feelings. Leave your feelings at the door so we can get to the facts. It's just some off the top of the brain stuff. But before I, get into that, I definitely wanted to make sure that you guys did your homework. That's crucial. I want y'all, anytime that I give a little bit of homework at the bottom of the page in the comment section, please entertain it because it would help to, it goes a long way, man, especially in terms of clarity. And one of the things that I suggested that you guys do was to look at the iconic Garvey photo that we've all seen a million times with him in that buggy, and he's in full uniform. He has the hat on and he has that medal. Those are the two things that I wanted to discuss because we have to understand that the world is ruled in signs and symbols. Okay, now that medal, which is the only medal that was issued by his organization, was called the Cross of African Redemption. And what I want you to do is look up the Cross of African Redemption and compare it to the Royal Victorian Order Cross that is given to those who display their allegiance to the crown. Now, there's an uncanny resemblance to the two. And if you would sit up there and tell me that with his connection that he had to London, being educated in London, going back to London, then dying in London, never making one trip to Africa, and in full European regalia, ain't no way in hell you're going to sit up here and tell me that this guy was for African repatriation. It is just not going to happen. You understand what I'm saying? The hat that he had on was called a Napoleon bicorn. Now, if you are like me, if you have somebody who claims that they're obsessed and are so in love with African culture, the very thing that you do is dress yourself in the symbols. Okay? And you don't dress yourself down in European garb and then say you're about Africa. You don't say that you're infatuated with European business, be educated in European business, and then sit up there and steal all this money from your people. You understand what I'm saying? Because what you have to understand, everything was set up for things to be, for people to steal this money from our people. How do we know that? Let's take a look at his co-conspirators. We know that his sentence was commuted by Calvin Coolidge. Calvin Coolidge, his administration was more or less ran by Andrew Mellon. Andrew Mellon was the Secretary of Treasury. Okay. And matter of fact, Andrew Mellon has so much power during Calvin Coolidge administration. It was actually called the Calvin Coolidge Andrew Mellon administration. All right. Now, when Herbert Hoover was elected president after Calvin Coolidge, okay, Herbert Hoover had actually made him the United States ambassador to the United Kingdom, which shows you how much power he had in his affiliation with the crown, okay, with the Rothschilds. All right. Now, when Franklin Delano Roosevelt, because this is all a play, it's all political theater. The American people were so upset, and they knew Andrew Mellon was the architect of this disaster, who had led to the 1929, who had basically designed the 1929 crash, which led to the Depression. Now, the Roosevelt administration wanted to get him for tax fraud, but he had so much power and people backing him, there was no way that they were going to convict this dude. There was no way they were going to be able to prosecute him. Okay, so he was able to escape prosecution. But that just lets you know that they were aware of his fraudulent behavior because the American people were aware of it. All right? Okay, so the thing is, what we have to understand too as well, the environment was set up to fleece the American people of their wealth. Not to mention all the gold, that the $150 million of gold, just disappeared. You understand what I'm saying? Not to mention that in 1933, that was when it was the creation of the FDIC. Now, we all know that when you go into the bank, you can say insured by the FDIC. That happened because of the crash in 1929. Because the American public, look, I'm not putting my money in the bank no more. If you put your money, before 1933, if you put your money in the bank and people had to run on the bank and the bank couldn't pay you back your money was gone. Imagine having $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 in the bank, and you go to the bank and the bank's like, I can't get you your money back. That's what they did to the American people and ran off. You have to understand that. And so Franklin Delano Roosevelt administration was the administration that they used in order to, put back confidence in the banking system. All right? Because this has always been a conflict all throughout American history. You must know that. You understand? So these were the individuals that he was in bed with. All right? So when, I hear stuff like, just like as of recently, Trevor Noah pops up on my news feed, the guy who hosts the Daily Show. And at first, he was all excited about the House impeaching Trump. Oh, Trump's been impeached. And then, all this woo and all of this garbage. And then they know from the audience reaction, it just goes to show you that, one, they're conditioning you because now from their reaction, you think that you should be happy. But if you were well versed in politics, you would have known that this is just political theater. How do we know this? Because we know that the Senate was controlled by the Republicans. And then I don't care who brings upon, if the House brings upon the impeachment, it has to go and be voted. 2/3 of the Senate has to convict the president. All right. And there's only 2 presidents in the United States history that's ever been impeached. Trump being the 3rd. Okay. And that was Andrew Johnson, which, just by chance got acquitted by the Senate, and President Nixon. And Nixon left office in 1974 before he could be charged. Now, ain't that something? Doesn't that tell you that they were all playing the game? Because who in the hell could escape charges just by leaving office? That's just like akin to me saying, oh, okay, I committed a crime in Michigan. Because I left that state, I shouldn't be charged no more. These people are in bed with one another. You must know that. It's a game to them. You understand? And this idea that, oh man, we've always had a 2-party system, nothing could be furthest from the truth. We've always had a 1-party system for a very long time. First, it was the Federalists. And then you had individuals who opposed, a central government because they didn't want an imbalance of power. They wanted to ensure that the state, this is how the Bill of Rights came into play, specifically because of the anti-federalists. But the anti-federalists end up becoming the Democratic Republican Party. It transformed itself right back into a 1-party system. Started by Thomas Jefferson and James Madison. Okay? It was called the Democratic Republican Party. Don't think that it's 2 parties. It was 1 party. Okay? Now, what split the party in 2? It was the 1824 election, because no one had won the popular vote, so it had to be then by the 12th Amendment sent right back to the House of Representatives for the president to be elected. All right. And then so they elected John Quincy Adams. All right. And after that, in 1828, then you had Andrew Jackson win. Now, mind you, Andrew Jackson and Adams are both a part of the Democratic Republican Party. They all a part of that 1 party. But Adams gets upset because, as we know, the agenda, they're quick to want to push in the agenda. But Andrew Jackson, he had his own ideas in mind. Now we don't know who he had influencing him, but we do know that he ran into stiff opposition from Adams and his men. It was actually called Adams' men. They were called the Republicans, but the reality of it is they were actually called Adams' men. And from that, then you just had the Democratic Party. As people just shifted the weight. But then we have to know that the Republican Party was not the second party in the United States. It was actually called the Whig Party. The Whig Party was the official second party in the United States of America. All right. And the first third party in America was actually called the Anti-Masonic Party. All right. So us, when people say, oh, the Illuminati, they're getting powerful, and we just not everybody getting up on game, man, the United States been up on game that these people were about to take over. That was actually the third party. I'm sorry, because I don't want people to get this and insinuate because I did that sign that is just by nature that I do that. But it was actually called the third party. All right. The third party, the official third party of the United States of America was the Anti-Masonic Party. You must know that. Okay, and then the Anti-Masonic Party gets, actually joins the Whig Party along with those who side with the Federalists too as well. So most people get this idea that the the Federalist Party was, the Whig Party was the direct successor of the Federalist Party, but that's not the case. All right, the Whig Party, obviously they were aligned, had some views that aligned with the Federalist Party, but they were a party all into themselves, and they eventually end up, I think, dying out by like 1838 or between 1840s 1850s, and then you have the Republican Party that eventually comes into being. But all the way up until then, they really didn't have any party until you had in the 1862 when you had Lincoln running. Okay, now what's interesting to note, let's backtrack just a little bit before the Civil War. Now around the Civil War, guess who gets elected? Mind you, we have to understand during the Civil War, there were 2 presidents in the United States. All right, there was Lincoln, and then there was Jefferson Davis. Now, let's give you something interesting, a tidbit of information. In 1862, there was the Homestead Act that passed. Now, so we all, a lot of people go, Lincoln was trying to get 40 acres and a mule, 40 acres and a mule. Do you know that Lincoln actually ran his platform on the Homestead Act? Now, what was the Homestead Act? The Homestead Act stated that if you were to till some land and go west, we would give you 160 acres if you tilled that land for 5 years. That was his that's what he ran on. Okay, that's what you have to understand. So this idea that they was gonna give it, this is what I tell you all the time, man. You got to understand your history, man. So I brought that up to say this. Jefferson Davis was the president of the South. Now, once again, this is all to show you that they all play for the same people. Jefferson Davis was, after the Civil War, he was supposed to be tried for treason. Okay, tried for treason. Do you think they convicted him? Do you think they prosecuted him? Nah, nope. Spent the rest of his life doing what he did. You understand what I'm saying? So this idea that we've always had a two-party system, get that out of your head. This always been about one, like they said, look at the language on the back of the dollar. E pluribus unum, which is Latin. Latin is their code language. Okay, out of many, one. It's only been one. You understand what I'm saying? Look at they've been telling you what's called their liturgical language, or the language they use in their rites and their rituals. It's Latin. Okay, that's why even when you heard of Trump, quid pro quo, or quid pro quo, that's Latin. Even on their churches, what's one of the sayings on their churches? It is I think it says Domine. No, it says Domine Jesus Rex et Redemptor per sanguinum tum salva nos. Which means Jesus is our King and Redemptor. Through his blood, may he heal us. All right? This is what they, see, first let's understand languages right quick. All right? You have to know this is, so they were really actually killing two birds with one stone, so to speak, because, there are the six largest languages, as of right now, are the Niger Congo, Austronesian. You have the Trans New Guinea, sorry, and you have the Sino-Tibetan. Then you have Indo-European and Afro-Asiatic. All right, and that's what you have to understand, is that when you saw them eliminating the individuals in the Congo, they were eliminating your people. So they know that language is what carries the secrets. You understand what I'm saying? You have to know something about Latin, because Latin, see, when we talk about Italy, this is one thing that people don't understand, is that Latin was spoken in Italy first. The so-called quote-unquote Italians did not speak Italian till later on, because Italian, Romanian, French, Spanish, Portuguese are all what's considered vulgar Latin, which means slang Latin. They were giving them the scraps of the language. That's what you have to understand. Matter of fact, when Saint Jerome had translated the Bible into from Latin, he used the Latin vulgar, or what the languages synonymous to the languages many people speak from that derive from Latin now. And Latin vulgate or vulgar meant that it was the slang form or the common form that the common people speak. They didn't even want the common people knowing what was going on, because they were using Latin. Latin is used in the Roman Rite, or Rite. And you have three phases of the Roman Rite, which is the pre-Tridentine, the Tridentine, and Pope Paul and Paul VI forms of rituals that are conducted within the Catholic Church. All right, and the Catholic Church didn't start speaking Latin until around the 4th century. You understand? Or using Latin as its official language in the 4th century, and Latin is from a small little town called Latium, all right, in Italy. All right, but what you have to understand too as well is that these individuals, this is from the Indo-European language, and the Indo-European language, that's Hellenic, which is the Greek, that is Baltic, that is the Germanic languages. You have to understand the German language English is a German language. It's just the most spoken form of the German language. You have English, German, and Dutch. These are called branches. Then you wonder why there's such a strong affiliation for Germany and why there were so many so-called Germans that were moving into America unabated, and they were locking up, like I told you, I mentioned before, how they had the Japanese in internment camps during World War II, but they were letting Germans through left and right, like they wasn't warring with Germany. Okay, so you had the Japanese in internment camps. The Germans were the #1 immigrant group in the United States. From matter of fact, during the Revolutionary War, there were 100,000 Germans in the United States. Okay, they were the #1 immigrant group from 1890 to 1980 rather. That's what you have to understand. So, when we talk about them ruling through signs and symbols, we have to identify the languages. We have to identify the co-conspirators. This goes a long way in helping to garner clarity. And that's one of the things that I was so upset about. Like I said before, there was always a one-party system for a very long time. We had always been, in opposition to secret societies. That's why there was an actual political party called the Anti-Masonic Party. Okay, which grew in popularity. As a matter of fact, so much so that it was the #1 party in New York at one point in time. But it actually ended up being absolved into the Whig Party, and then the Whig Party ended up being dissolved and then turning into the Republican Party. But these are conscious efforts that are made. These are strategic plans that have been set in place by the oligarchy, giving you the illusion that there is choice. They knew 3 was too much. They said, let's boil it down to 2. But 2 is really 1. That's why I say e pluribus unum. Out of many, 1. It's still one game. That's one thing that you have to understand. It's still one game, man. So, just the language is so toxic. I was even talking to a brother, man. They was talking about, what hood somebody from, hood this, hood that. And we never even understood, and that term doesn't even go back too far because it's an English term. It's a suffix. It denotes state, condition, or nature. So for instance, you have childhood, adulthood, knighthood, priesthood, brotherhood, sisterhood, etc. So when brothers just say they from the hood, you leave it open to interpretation. I'm from the hood. What hood? What's your nature? What's your state or what's your condition? Just a hood? You're just saying you have a nature, but what nature is it? You understand what I'm saying? This is why they laugh at you and mock you, because they know you running around here all haphazard, describing yourself. And if it's up to them, they'll say you still in your childhood. You understand what I'm saying? We must define ourselves, man. Otherwise, we leave ourselves at the mercy of individuals who are empowered to define us for us. That's what it boils down to. I'm just so sick and tired of people not doing their research, man. Like I told you before, we're not here to do surface level information. We're here to provide and put things into concrete terms so that it provides a little bit more clarity in order for us to move with due diligence. Otherwise, we stand to continue to keep making the same mistakes all over again. And that is just inexcusable. We cannot continue to keep doing that, man. It's just like I was having a conversation. I don't know. I'm sorry. These are sporadic thoughts. I try to hit on one, but I go from one to the next simply because it's a lot on my mind right now, man. From the discussions that I've been having with people, it's just gotten me irate. Like we fall victim to living in the moment simply because, our mindset is always geared toward current events. We look at ourselves in this bubble. We don't want to pay attention to history. We think that it's just, it's not worth mentioning. But in my opinion, like I said, this is how you garner the most clarity. But I was having a discussion with all people. One of the most, one of the individuals that is dear to me, which is my mom. Like, dear to anybody. Hopefully, if you have a great relationship with your mom. I mean, to me, the relationship with my mom is dictated by how much I don't say. I always have to act as if I don't really have too much vested in the scholastic approach to religion, because then she is tremendously invested emotionally into being a witness, a Jehovah's Witness. And if you ever if you have anybody affiliated with that organization, then you already know that it's hard to talk to them type of people, man. And you stand the risk of losing a relationship with someone who's important to you because they are part of an organization that is damn near cult-like, and it's just devastating because, like I said, if anyone knew the origins of the organization, which most of them don't, they're part of an organization. When I started to do my research on the organization years ago, that's what encouraged me to leave because, I dig deep. You know, we were raised under that organization. You know, when we were little, we wouldn't go every day, but that was our spiritual, that was our quote unquote, you know, spiritual background or religious background. So, you know, in the event that we did want to change our life, that was, you know, by default where we ran to. And you know, like I said, after a while of doing my research, I wasn't, you know, I felt like I couldn't be a part of that no more, right? And I just knew where my journey was, what my journey would consist of. And, you know, when you take a look at it, it was started by Charles Taze Russell. Charles Taze Russell was a Seventh-day Adventist. Now, he just got the only thing, like I tell witnesses all the time, he was fed up with, uh, you know, the policies, the organizational policies of the Seventh-day Adventists. He felt like they put too much weight on members, etc. But yet, this is exactly what he ended up doing to his members. It was just a vie for power. Now, he created 7 volumes. Now, his 7th volume of work came into dispute with a guy by the name of Rutherford. Now, you know, Rutherford, and the reason being is because Charles Taze Russell thought that Jesus would come back, and when he did come back, he would return in the place of Egypt. Okay, he actually used the dimensions of the pyramid in order to calculate the date 1914 when there was a war in heaven. Okay, so this is where he ran into dispute because, according to the Bible, Egypt has always been seen as the enemy of the Jews. You know, they enslaved the Jews. You understand what I'm saying? That's what's critical to our understanding. And so Rutherford didn't agree with that because he wanted Egypt to be seen as the enemy. They enslaved the chosen people, etc. So he had created a sect, you know, that split the organization in two called the Millennial Dawnists. Okay, which eventually became the Jehovah's Witnesses in 1931. All right, now that's crucial for our understanding because then even in the 1970s, he ends up buying a home in California, talking about this is where Jacob and Joseph and Moses, these are where they're gonna come back to my mansion, and you know that he just went crazy. You know. They excuse that part of their history, and then they always talked about how they didn't want to predict the end. But all throughout the 20th centuries, there are numerous dates that they had given out, you know, through their organization, declaring the end until I think in the late 70s, and so they just stopped doing it because they knew that that was, you know, they had found themselves mimicking what the Seventh-day Adventists were so hung up on, giving dates and you know and times as to whereas they thought the world would end. All right, but they fell victim to that too as well. But the point being is that it's so difficult to you know, put all these things into perspective simply because you know, so many people are emotional and fail to do their homework. And yet, you know, what was insane, I think what I had garnered most from that conversation was the fact that 400 is more than 6,000. And what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is that, you know, I hear this is the counter argument from a lot of people, and I even heard that from all, you know, with slavery, because, you know, even though I don't subscribe totally to slavery, I tell everybody all the time, go look at a map of 1763 where King George had, you know, basically drew the line and told the colonists, like, look, everything west of the Mississippi, you can't colonize. You know, that's Indian territory. That's what infuriated the colonists, because it was always about expansion. They, you know, you take a look at those little bitty ass colonies, man. There was no way slavery could have been as traumatic and could have been as all encompassing as they make it out to be when they tell you about your history. But I digress. The point being is that you know, when you are told about, you know, even you mention it, because to my opinion, like I said, if it's just 1, 10, 20, 100 of us that went through it, you got to feel the pain. You know, it doesn't matter how many of us went through it. If we did go through it, then it is worth talking about. It's worth noting. So, you know, anytime you bring that up, the counter argument is, oh, it was too long ago. That was so long ago, 400 years, man, 400 years so long ago. But they got you dying. You telling me somebody, you know, because we already know that, you know, Islam and Christianity are two heads of the same beast. You know, matter of fact, the name Jesus is mentioned in the Quran more than the Bible. You understand what I'm saying? But yet and still, like we said, these individuals, for something that happened, quote unquote, 6,000 years ago, all right, will strap bombs on their chests and hijack planes, supposedly, and fly them into buildings. All right, and you have Christians who will go to war through crusades and go to war with everybody and their mama, and you got people, families that will be torn apart because of different ideological perspectives, you know, for something that happened 6,000 years ago. Ironically enough, to a people who were enslaved. So once again, the Jews have been adept at getting you to appreciate their slavery, whether their slavery happened 6,000 years ago or whether their enslavement was through the Hitler regime. Regardless, it's more important in your life, in the lives of your ancestors. What you was going through, that was too long ago, 400 years. But what we went through 6,000 years ago, that wasn't too long ago. You see how you see how adept they are at making you look. Think about that. You got people sitting up here right now, live their lives day to day according to a spiritual strategy that is in the Bible that, had told you that this happened thousands of years ago. Yet when you run around as a revolutionary and talk about what happened 400 years ago, that was too long ago. Nigga, get a watch. That happened so long ago. What you complaining about? And then in the same breath, our Savior Jesus. Like, you got to be kidding me, man. You really got to be kidding me. And this is what I'm talking about. So this is one of the things that got me upset. I just, I wanted to touch on a lot of different subjects. It seemed like it was all over the place, but I just wanted to, this is just what was happening. I just wanted to post a video, ranting and raving, because now I got the opportunity to. I don't get a lot of, ever since I was talking about Garvey, I had niggas come out the woodworks there, ever since I made comments about, the state of our sisters, and even, this is the state of our men too as well. We're not, the ironic part about it is that it's the sisters raising the men. If we know, especially since the 1980s, that we are in households that are headed by women, and then women hate the men, you're the one raising the men. This is why somebody has to step in. I didn't, I was raised by my mom. My dad, I never really got an opportunity to know him until later on in my life. But yet that didn't stop me from understanding that I got to be an integral part of my son's life. And anybody who's seen any of my videos, my son's in most of them, ripping and running around, doing what he does, but I understood what my responsibility was, and I take it up wholeheartedly and unapologetically. This is me. You understand? Somebody has to break the cycle. I teach them that, when you run into black women, as long as they, treat themselves accordingly and they treat themselves with respect, be in and don't disrespect them if they don't. Just don't fraternize with them. Because don't put yourself in a position where you have to, or where you begin to dislike someone. Because that's many times what will happen. If you're not aligned with someone ideologically, what's going to happen is either they're going to bring you down to their level or you're going to bring them up to yours. And most of the time, man, negative energy seems to overwhelm. So we don't want to put our children in a position to where they succumb to, thinking that depreciates their existence merely because they fail to realize that you have to be more. Your self-expression has to be more than what you see physically. At some point in time, you have to be adept up here. We have to understand that us exercising our cognitive ability is what will be the true measure of our humanity. That's really what it's all about. And don't stop letting people trick us. Continue to keep doing your research. Be adamant about it. Be adamant about digging deeply. Don't let them convince you and wax and wane. Oh, the Republican Party did the Republicans, and then Democrat. It's always been one party. The only reason why they split it later on is because they understood that they have to give Americans the illusion of choice. They have to give Americans the illusion of choice. It's always been a one-party system. It's always been an elite. Why do you think these people who run it, man, in their 70s and 80s? You can't get that? With all of the wealth and knowledge that is in the younger generation, they ain't letting you run. You ain't got no money behind you. And then when they they end up doing this gerrymandering crap or trying to get you to have way more signatures than the people who are the incumbents. They maintain their power, man. They're giving you the illusion that you got choice. Until you dig deeply and understand, like, look, this is what has to happen. I cannot continue to keep letting people give me compartmentalized information and give it to me in bits and pieces, and that's how you will begin to operate intellectually. You will see things as to how they, and you will react to them according to when they occur, and you won't really have the wherewithal to understand that you can counteract these pressures, and you can counteract the onslaught by being prepared. And how do you prepare yourself? By learning how these things came about, the origins of these things. Everything has its beginnings, man. You know, so I say all that to say this. This is, you know, one, you know, another installation of Facts Over Feelings up for Westcott. We'll be back later. Holla at you, boy.